Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, keynote speaker, strategist, and your chief shark officer. What does differentiation mean to you and your brand? When you look at the sea of sameness, most businesses look like everyone else they compete with in the marketplace. But whether the logo looks incredibly unique or the reviews look similar to everyone else on a 5-point scale, what it ultimately comes down to is what is the differentiating experience you provide customers, not just when they sign up or buy that first time, but what becomes expected over and over again, all while you're trying to not just meet their expectations, but to exceed them. So what is your competitive differentiator? Stan Phelps is a speaker, the best-selling author of the Goldfish Series of books, a Forbes Contributor, and a marketing instructor for the ANA School of Marketing and Rutgers Business School. And on this episode, we'll discuss the differentiating experience your brand has control over, a lot about goldfish, different ways to be different, embracing your flaws and being flawsome, that very first pet, a troubling of goldfish books, exceeding expectations, Buckley's cough syrup, the carp family, inspired by cheddar, tartaric acid, and a lot more. So let's tune in to the Goldfish Guy and the one and only Shark Guy on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Stan, welcome to A Shark's Perspective. Would you please give us a little bit about your background and your career to date?
Sure. Stan Phelps, author and speaker. I started out working in sports marketing. On the agency side, I worked for a group called IMG. And then I spent about a decade on the brand side working with Adidas and the PGA of America. And then I finished my 20 plus year career again on the agency side in experiential marketing. And based on my experiences there led me to start writing, and that writing led to now a whole series of books.
So you got several published books, a series of books with goldfish in the title. What was the idea around that? What's the affinity for goldfish?
So the goldfish, a couple of things. One, it was my very first pet. Kenneth, do you remember your first pet?
It was a dog, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So I was 6, and my own very first pet was a goldfish that I won at a carnival. So that's part of the reason why it's important to me. The other part is because of a hotel chain called Kimpton. Ever stayed at a Kimpton?
No, I haven't.
So it's now owned by IAT, but it's a group of boutique hotels throughout the US and Canada. And they really get the guest experience. So if you stay at a Kimpton, they do a lot of little things to add value. Gourmet coffee for free in the lobby. They do wine tasting in the afternoon. And they're pet friendly. But I love this. If you stay at a Kimpton hotel, maybe you're getting a little lonely. Some of the Kimpton hotels would give you a pet goldfish for your stay. And so I love that as a little signature thing that you do to stand out in what I would call a sea of sameness. And it turns out what's really interesting, the goldfish is really just, for my books, is a metaphor for growth via differentiation.
And I think that's fascinating. I think I'd heard the story with the fish, but I didn't put it with that chain of hotels.
I'll share with you. So most people have heard this about a goldfish. The goldfish will grow to the size of the bowl or the pond that they're in. And that's a direct correlation. The bigger the bowl, the bigger the pond, the more they grow. So that's kind of the first growth factor of 5 for a goldfish. And what I talk about in my keynotes and workshops is that these 5 growth factors apply to any organization. So if we think about, say, for example, the first one, the size of the bowl or the pond, well, in business, that's simply the market that you serve. Does that make sense, Kenneth?
It does.
The bigger the market you serve, the more you can grow. Here's number 2. If you're a goldfish, your growth is also determined by the other goldfish that are in that bowl or pond. And this one's an inverse relationship. So the less goldfish in the bowl or the pond, the more you typically grow, the more it impacts or stunts your growth. So who are the other goldfish in business?
Your competitors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your competition, right? Here's the third one that used to be tough until the pandemic really hit us. If you're a goldfish, your growth is all impacted by the quality of the surrounding that you're in. Water is really important. And the more nutrients in the water, the less cloudy the water is, the more you grow. So I want you to think macro. What quality of that surrounding if you're in business? It's simply the economy, right? Your ability to grow is impacted by things like regulations, tariffs, access to capital, right? Consumer confidence, people's willingness to purchase. So that's number 3. Very quickly, number 4 is for a goldfish is how they do in their first 4 months of life. So they're tiny when they're born. A goldfish, a baby goldfish is called a fry, as in small fry. So they have about 100 brothers or sisters. So how they do in the first 120 days will impact how big they ultimately get. And so what is that in business? It's simply, how do you do as a startup? Or if you launch a new product or service, how do you do in that like critical first few months? And so number 5 for a goldfish is their genetic makeup. So what is that goldfish born with that separates it from all of the other goldfish in the bowl or the pond? And the stronger their genes are and the more that they're separated, typically the bigger they grow. If their genes are weak and they're like every one of the other goldfish, the less they typically grow. So in business, that really comes down to differentiation. How do you stand out amongst everyone else that you compete with? And the kind of takeaway is, and I challenge people and I say, well, if you've already been in business for 4 months, what do you really have control over? Do you have control over the market? No. How about your competition? Not unless you're buying them, right? And if anyone listening to this right now has control over the economy, please reach out to me. I would appreciate that. The only thing you have control over is how you differentiate what you do, but more importantly, I would say why you do it and how you do it. And that really speaks to the importance of experience being maybe the greatest form of marketing for your business.
I got it. So do you own a goldfish now?
I do not own a goldfish now.
You don't have an aquarium for your kids or your family?
I travel too much, and we did for a short time because I was so proud. I took my oldest son to the North Carolina State Fair, and he did the same thing I did. He threw the ping pong ball, and he came home with his goldfish. Gold. Nothing to do with us. A lot of times they don't live very long. And unfortunately, after a few months, our goldfish passed and we did not replace the goldfish.
They didn't pass. You set them free down a toilet. Do you know what I thought that was interesting because I was looking at how many books you had. Do you know what a group of goldfish is called? You could say this for your group of books.
A school?
No, it's a troubling. I've never heard that before. Yeah, a troubling, like a herd of cows or a school of fish. It's a troubling of goldfish. Who knew? So
I did not know that. I love that.
A troubling of goldfish books. So I will just tell you though that I find that most people that are obsessed with fish are just kind of weird.
I take that as a compliment.
Yes, my parents would not let me have a pet shark, so we had the dog instead. So, but let's dive in a little bit further into the philosophy. And talk about how we change that paradigm of marketing by encouraging audiences to focus on experiences, as you said, as the ultimate competitive differentiator. One of the things you just talked about is you worked for brands like Adidas or Adidas in Europe, or for agencies where you lived in that side as well. When you start thinking about how we blend this all together, because again, at the end of the day, the customer doesn't know who came up with the great idea for the goldfish as the therapy fish in the bedroom at the Clinton Hotel. There seems to still be a mix, because we've got a lot of great brands with great ideas. We got a lot of great agencies, but they never seem to quite mesh and live up to what the customer expectations are. Why do you think that is?
Well, first off, I think the biggest myth in marketing is simply trying to meet the expectations of a customer, right? And this was kind of my moment of truth. And I won't even go into the story, but it's kind of what led me on this journey, is that no one ever just simply meets the expectations of a customer, right? You either exceed their expectations or you fall short. It's like being on time. No one is ever just on time. You're either late or you're early, right?
Well, you're never inspired to give a 3-star review. It's a 5-star
no
or a
one
1-star.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. So here's the thing. I think as an owner, from an expectation perspective, it's either you decide to exceed expectations and do more, or you decide just what I do is just good enough and I just shoot to be good enough. And to me, I think in the marketplace, there's a huge difference between a referred customer as opposed to a traditionally acquired customer. And so I'm in the business of trying to encourage companies to think about little ways that they can do more, right, to earn those referrals and those valuable customers.
fair. So how do we get there to where employees at companies realize they're able to achieve this? I know you talk a lot about purposeful digital transformation. Explain what that means and how we help employees and customers get to that place where we're exceeding expectations.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm a marketer. So my first book was all about the customer, right? All about, I collected over 1,000 examples of companies that did signature little things. I started to try to break down, the different ways that you can do it. It turns out that there's 10 different ways you can do it. But what I quickly realized is that the companies that really got it, Kenneth, didn't focus so much on the customers themselves. They did the same things for the employees and actually put a greater emphasis on their employees, because without engaged employees, you have a chance of delivering that great experience. And so that led me to the second book in the series. And it's kind of, now there's 10 different colors in the series, but it all at the end of the day really comes down to taking care of the employees that you have, right? Making sure that they're engaged and delivering that differentiated experience to the customers that you serve. Part of that is, delving into and embracing purpose as part of it. Part of it is leveraging technology as a way to improve the experience and reduce the effort your customers have to go through. So there are a lot of different elements to it, but at the end of the day, it comes down to employees and customers.
So you also talk about in Pink Goldfish, you write about how true differentiation in business is rare. We're now living in an age of equivalency. What are some of the ways that businesses can leverage what makes their brand unique in your eyes?
Yeah, so this is really passionate for me as a marketing guy, is thinking about, from a strategy perspective, how do you stand out? And so Pink Goldfish, which was the 6th color in the series, is is based on my co-author and I looking at now over 400 companies that achieved competitive separation. And what we found is that there's really only two ways that you can stand out and be different. One is to do more. It's the more strategy. Do more of what makes you kind of inherently unique compared to everyone else that's quote unquote normal. And the second way is a less strategy. Another way to stand out is to purposely do less of what everyone else does as quote unquote normal. And so I think what great companies that can differentiate themselves is that they understand that the things that they may think are flaws about them, instead of trying to correct those flaws and become like everyone else, what smart companies do is that they embrace those flaws as the things that make them awesome. Or as we say in the book, the things that make them flawsome.
Yeah. So can you give us a practical real world example of that, of one that you identified?
Yeah. So the cornerstone of, and flawsome, by the way, is not just an idea. It's also works to be the acronym that drives the 8 different ways that you can be different. Yeah. And the cornerstone of that is this idea of flaunting. That's the F in flawsome, meaning that if you can't kind of embrace who you are, then there's really nowhere. If you can't do that, there's nowhere else to go. So there's a great example we talk about from Canada, a cough syrup company called Buckley's. And so, what's the flaw of cough syrup? It's the taste, right? No one has ever drank something in their life and said, "Ooh, this tastes so good. It tastes like cough syrup," right? Those words. So what most normal cough syrup companies do is that they try to cover up that fact. They flavor it, they reformulate it, right? They try to figure out, they come up with a pill version, right? To make it more palatable. Well, this company in Canada called Buckley's, instead of trying to correct that flaw, they leaned into it. And they created an entire campaign that spoke to how bad Buckley's actually tastes. And they compared in this campaign Buckley's cough syrup to trash bag leakage, sweaty gym socks. I mean, like a taste test, right? And and the tagline of the campaign is, people swear by it and at it. Right? It tastes awful. Why? Because it works. And I love this. By owning that flaw and embracing it, they stood out. Before the campaign, they were just 2% of the market in Canada. Within a year, they had shot up to 11% of the market. And so to me, that's a great example of understanding that every weakness has a corresponding strength. And one of the things I think horribly that we do as marketers is we begin to benchmark people within our space. And we look at whoever the leader is, and we start to try to break down the things that make them successful. And then whether we want to admit it or not, what do we do next, Kenneth?
Try to imitate it or mimic it.
Yeah, we start to emulate the things that we think make them successful. And that's not a road to standing out and being different. That's a road to being quote unquote normal. And so that example of flaunting is, a simple one of understanding what makes you unique and different and trying to cover up and fix it. Maybe what you need to do is double or triple down on it, what we call lopsiding. And then there's an entire concept called withholding, which is this idea of maybe not doing everything that's normal.
Let me ask you also, then, we don't have to go too far into this, but you talked about flaunting. To let us know what the rest of the flawsome acronym means.
Sure. So flaunting, lopsiding. Next one's my favorite, antagonizing, right? You don't have to be for everyone. Know who you're for, but particularly who you're not for. W is withholding, which is actually doing less. The S is for swerving, which is the idea of maybe doing smaller things, not massive things, swerving. O is for opposing. When everyone starts to follow the leader, some people go in the exact opposite direction. And sometimes the opposite of a good thing is also a good thing. The M is very much like my first book, Purple Goldfish. It's what we call micro weirding. So that's really small things that you do with the experience that either embraces what makes you unique or less of what everyone does is normal. And then in the 2.0, we added the E, which is exposing. And exposing is the idea of like owning maybe even your negative reviews, like not trying to push them aside, because in those negative reviews are truths about who you are and who you're for. So I'll give you a great example from the Pink Goldfish 2.0. There's a resort, a mountain resort in Utah called Snowbird. I got a chance to visit it this summer. I mean, it's like a sheer cliff that you have to ski or snowboard on. It is not for the faint of heart, right? So they did an entire campaign where all they did was feature their 1-star reviews. You know, I felt like my life was in danger, right? Too much powder, right? I mean, these things are like antithetical to why people want to go skiing, because they're risk takers, right? Or, you know, for a passionate skier, there's no such thing as too much powder, right? No easy trails, right? It's so essentially what they're doing by exposing it is they're pushing away the people that they'd never be a good fit for. And by pushing those people away, they're attracting the ones that they actually want.
So when you're delivering this Flossom method or your methodology, whether it's in a consulting engagement or it's on stage, what pushback do you get from people that would disagree with this? Because when I hear you elaborate extremely well, and I'm always curious, but I'm wondering about the client out there that you're talking to. What are they hearing and rebutting with or pushing back on, if you will?
I'll give you a couple. One is for Purple Goldfish, and that is, and again, there's a reason behind all of these colors, but that's about doing little things for your customers. And people say, well, that's great from a surprise and delight perspective, but what happens the second or the third or the fourth time that customer, that little extra now becomes what? It becomes an expectation. And I tell people, yeah, absolutely. This is not a marketing campaign, right? Where you do a little something extra and then 3 months later they come back and it's gone. You need to look at these things that you do as little extras of things that you do to go above and beyond the transaction to honor the relationship. And then when you add these things, yeah, it may become part of the expectation, but it also becomes part of the differentiation, right? One of my favorite examples from Purple, and most people have experienced this, when you stay at a DoubleTree hotel, what do you get right when you check in?
A chocolate chip cookie.
You get a warm
cookie, yes.
chip cookie, individually wrapped, right? Now, yes, am I going to expect that the next time I go to a DoubleTree? Yeah,
absolutely. I do.
I actually would be upset if I didn't get it. But here's the thing that people miss. If staying at the DoubleTree or staying at the Marriott Courtyard is, you know, apples to apples, I'm probably going to pick the DoubleTree because I love that cookie. And so it also becomes part of a reason for people to talk about the experience. And you nailed it on the head. We don't talk about the average or the what we expected, right? That we only talk about the things that are unique and different. And so most businesses agree that, word of mouth is the best thing in terms of powering their business. And I'll give credit to Jay Baer for this. 90% of businesses say it's the number one thing. And then the follow-up is, well, who has a word of mouth strategy? And it's like less than 1% of businesses. Here's one I get from Pink Goldfish, which is embracing what makes you weird, or in some cases weak or flawed, is, hey, we've been a business, we're established, we can't do this because we're just too big or we have too much history. And so my pushback is, yeah, maybe you don't start with the massive stuff. Maybe you start with little things that you can do, right? To differentiate the experience. Sometimes I get pushback because green goldfish is about the things that you do for your employees. And before, say, the last 2 years, I would get, well, those things just become, again, expectations, or people become complacent, or they become entitled that the company is doing all of these little things for them. And then we're in a climate where it's hard to recruit good people. You're losing institutional knowledge and people that have been around for years. And here's the thing, if all you separate yourself is based on the money that you give to people, I've got news for you. People that just care about money can be easily bought, right? You have to think about the ways that you do little things to bring your culture to life, right? To make your people feel like they're valued, right? And they're part of something, in order to get them to care and to be engaged.
Love it. Stan, I asked this of all my guests, and since you are a fish lover, I get to ask you, and you're not too far from the Carolina coast. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Ooh, favorite type of shark and why? I'm going to say the hammerhead.
Good choice.
Because they don't look like any other shark. They look so darn weird. And I love, especially if you ever seen like thousands of them.
Oh yeah. Galapagos.
Swirling.
Yep.
Swirling. And so I do a fun thing with, that really helps people create their own goldfish called Goldfish Tank. And so as part of that, I love the idea of that kind of swirling imagery.
Yeah, I've seen swarms of sharks, and the ones that I saw with the hammerhead, that migration down the Galapagos Islands is life-changing. So
wow.
Stan, yeah, it takes forever to get there, but it's worth seeing them just swim overhead. Well, Stan, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today on a Friday afternoon when we record this? Yeah.
Let's go.
All right. Number 1. And it's not because of the book. So this is close enough though. Goldfish or koi?
Oh, goldfish by far.
They're both part of the carp family. I did not know that. I thought they were pretty much the same fish. All right. Number 2, being a speaker or being a marketer?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm going to say speaker, just because I'm passionate about what I do. And my goal is to get people to think differently about marketing. And marketing should be as much, if not more, about the customer that you serve, rather than being all about the prospect that you chase.
Would that have changed at all if I'd said being a speaker or being a golfer? Because the first time I called you, you were out on the course. We talked for a half hour. You work for
That
the
is the
PGA.
silver lining of the pandemic for me is golf. Yes.
There you go. All right, number 3, cheese flavors. This may sound weird, but it'll make sense later. Mozzarella or cheddar?
I'm a mozzarella guy. I grew up in New York. I love pizza, especially like a good thin crust brick oven pizza with like really good mozzarella.
So cheddar is the flavor of cheese on the Goldfish snacks. So that was why that almost made sense. So, all right, number 4. Told you I made these tailor-made for you. Number 4.
But by the way, I want to say this. When I wrote the original book, Purple Goldfish, I lived in Norwalk, Connecticut. And so literally I lived about a mile from Westport, Connecticut. And that's where Pepperidge Farms started.
Nice.
So there is a little bit of, I would say, nexus between me being inspired by that. In fact, I write about going into their factory store in the first book and having an experience.
Great point. All right. Number 4, Swedish fish or Sour Patch?
Swedish all the day. I'm more of a sweet than a sour guy.
I always thought they looked like, little goldfish. They're not, but the only significant difference is the addition of tartaric acid, which gives Sour Patch Kids the sour taste, but they're made by the same company. I thought that was interesting.
I did not know that.
I didn't either. And I'm full of useless trivia like that. Shark Trivia Night, I'm your guy. All right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, I living in North Carolina for almost the last 10 years.
Where they have inferior barbecue to Memphis barbecue?
Yes. By the way, Jim and Nick's. Have you ever been to Jim and Nick's?
Yeah.
So I'm a cornbread guy. So I love the fact this is a little extra that they do is that they have those little, I forget what they call them, the little cornbread thing. So I'm more cornbread, put a little cheddar, a little jalapeno flavor. I'm right there.
Good man. All right. So Stan, where can people find out more about you? Keep up with the troubling of books. see you speak on stage, read your thoughts and more.
Best way is my website. So stanphelps.com or stanphelpsspeaks.com. That'll take you to the same place. I also try to eat my own dog food. I lopside what I do on LinkedIn. So that's also a great place. I write every day under a hashtag called the 1299.
Awesome. And your blogs are great. I've seen quite a few of them. Stan, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Kenneth, it was my pleasure.
So there was my conversation with Stan Phelps, a speaker, the best-selling author of the Goldfish Series of books, a Forbes contributor, and a marketing instructor for the ANA School of Marketing and Rutgers Business School. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from a conversation with him. First, don't focus just on customers. You hear me talk about employee engagement all the time on this show as well, and he eloquently talks about putting an even greater emphasis on employees too for delivering that great experience. The greatest experience in the world won't be seen or heard unless that transformation and those rewards, if you will, extend to your employees who deliver the experience from marketing to sales to billing to customer service and all. It's pretty easy to measure customer reviews, but true employee sentiment is well worth your measurement investments as well. Second, how do you stand out? This is a topic both Stan and I are passionate about, and it's one of my main keynotes is on this subject as well. Stan believes that there are basically only 2 ways to be different. 1, it's to do more of what makes you inherently unique compared to the normal. And 2, it's to do purposefully less of what makes everyone else normal. He also points out that what many may see as a weakness, or in this case, something that makes them less normal, other smarter brands understand that the things that they may think are flaws should be embraced. Those flaws make you flawsome. And I may disagree somewhat on how or how many, but he's spot on. We lean too much into the yin, but we definitely should embrace our yang. Third, the pushback. I often find there's too much of that from brands and agencies alike. Brands and agencies don't always tie these experiences enough truly to the DNA. They become a great campaign idea to get you in the door, so to speak. However, the second or third or fourth time someone comes back, this air quote campaign idea becomes expected. And it's part of the expectation and differentiation. The marketing has to be good, that sizzle, but ultimately the steak has to be great, or nothing else that got you in the door matters. Spend more time on marketing the experience of the steak and less on the sizzle if you want to keep them coming back again and again and again. And if you don't eat meat, then well, this idea will be lost on you because tofu should never sizzle or be eaten anyway. So, yuck. There you go. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I am so thankful to everyone who listens. Please consider writing a review and letting me know your thoughts on the show. So it's back in the water for me. Not in a bowl or in a tank, but back in the ocean for another deeper dive. Please join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.